Welcome to Twist of Revenge, where we tell stories that touch more than just the heart. They echo in places we often bury too deep to name. If stories of family, quiet sacrifice, and unexpected truths move you the way they move us, we hope you'll take a moment to subscribe. Every tale we tell is a little reminder. Sometimes, love shows up in the most ordinary of disguises. Today's story is titled, "The Man I Mocked for Being a Grocery Store Security Guard Turned Out to Be My Father in Disguise." Chapter 1. The Man by the Sliding Doors. There was a man who stood by the automatic doors of our neighborhood supermarket. Every time I walked in, headphones in, hoodie up, hands stuffed in my pockets, there he was, back straight, eyes soft but tired, that neon vest hanging awkwardly on a frame too thin for it. He never smiled, not fully, just a twitch of the corner of his lips when our eyes met. Which, truthfully, wasn't often. I made sure of that. I was 17, and 17-year-olds don't exactly go looking for human connection while buying oat milk and ramen. Especially not from people like him. To me, he was just that guy, the old security guard with scuffed boots and an expression like he carried too many yesterdays. Harmless. Forgettable. A little pathetic. I remember once telling my best friend, "That man gives failed dreams energy." She laughed. I laughed too, loudly, cruelly, and all the while he was standing just 5 feet away. He didn't flinch, didn't look up. But now I wonder, did he hear me? Did he know? The truth is, I thought I was above him. I lived in a nice house, drove my mom's hand-me-down Lexus, had good enough grades and big plans for college. He was the guy who checked receipts and watched cameras. A nobody, really. Except he wasn't. He wasn't a nobody. Not to me, not ever. I just didn't know it yet. I've replayed that day 1,000 times, the way the automatic doors whooshed open, how I pushed past a cart too fast, almost bumping into him. He muttered, "Careful there, sweetheart." And I rolled my eyes. Sweetheart. What kind of weird old man calls a stranger that? But it wasn't weird, not when you know the truth. Not when you learn that the stranger is your father. The one you were told had died before you were old enough to remember. The one your mother never spoke of. The one who, instead of vanishing, never actually left. He stayed. Just far enough to be unnoticed, and close enough to never let anything happen to me. But let me not rush. Because before the truth cracked me open, I had to break in all the ways a daughter breaks when she realizes she's been living a lie. And the man she'd mocked the most was the only one who had truly loved her all along. This is the story of how I found him. Or rather, how he never stopped watching over me. Waiting, quietly, patiently, by the sliding doors. Chapter 2. Things my mother never said. My mother used to say that silence was a form of strength. She believed in tight routines, clean countertops, and emotions folded neatly like laundry. In our home, the past wasn't something we discussed, it was something we painted over. She didn't cry, at least not in front of me. And when I asked about my father as a child, she always gave the same answer. "He's gone," she'd say, as if it explained everything. When I was younger, I used to imagine gone meant heroic. Like maybe he'd died saving someone in a fire, or maybe he'd been a soldier who never made it home. My childish brain craved poetry, craved a noble reason for the emptiness. But over the years, the mystery hardened into something colder. Gone stopped meaning brave and started meaning coward. My mother never confirmed it. But the way her jaw clenched, the way she changed the subject, the way she looked out the window when his name was mentioned, it told me enough. Eventually, I stopped asking. Instead, I learned to admire her, single mother, 2 jobs, always on her feet. She cooked dinner at 9 p.m., paid bills by candlelight during blackouts, and still somehow managed to pack my lunch with a sticky note that said, "Do your best, love you." I told myself she was enough, that I didn't need a dad, but the hole was there. It just changed shape as I got older. It became distrust. It became the sarcasm I wore like armor. It became the way I avoided Father's Day altogether. And somewhere behind the walls I'd built, I believed this story we lived was all there was to know. Until the day I saw her pause. It was a Wednesday. We were in line at the store, that store, the one with the man I never noticed properly. My mother was flipping through coupons, her glasses slipping down her nose. I was scrolling on my phone, pretending not to be annoyed. Then I heard her breath catch. Not loud, but sharp, like someone had bitten into a memory. She looked up, and for a split second her eyes had locked on the security guard. That man, the one I passed without thought, the one who always said evening like he meant it. There was something in her face I couldn't read. Recognition, maybe, regret. But just as fast she dropped her gaze and turned to me. "Let's go, we'll come back later." "But we're next." I said, "Let's go." Her voice left no room for argument. I remember walking behind her out of the store, bag still empty, the wind stinging my face. She never looked back. Neither did he, but I did, just once, and he was still there, standing by the sliding doors, hands folded, eyes watching. Only this time he wasn't looking at me. He was watching her. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about the way she looked at him unsettled me. There were so many things my mother never said, so many holes she covered with busyness and bedtime kisses and rules about not eating in bed. But that look, whatever it was, it slipped through. I started wondering, who was he? Why was he always there, always alone, always silent? And why, for the first time, did I feel like he was the one I should have been watching all along? Chapter 3. The smallest signs always come first. The funny thing about memory is how it chooses its moments. I had passed that man by more times than I could count, on my way to grab milk, granola bars, tampons, the kind of errands that leave no trace. But once the seed of suspicion had been planted, I began to notice everything. Like the way he always stood slightly straighter when I walked in, or how he always gave me space, never too close, never invasive, but always near enough. And then there were the smiles, not real ones, not the big, toothy kind, but these faint lifts at the corner of his mouth, like he was seeing something he had once lost and almost didn't expect to see again. I started watching him back, not obviously, not enough for my mother to notice, but I'd linger near the entrance a second longer. I'd peek over my shoulder as I walked down an aisle. Sometimes I'd circle back for no reason at all, pretending I forgot something. And he was always there, always still, always watching, not in a creepy way, in a way that made me feel safer somehow. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. It got worse after the night I saw the shoebox. I had gone into the attic looking for my old high school yearbooks, half lost in nostalgia. We rarely went up there. The floorboards groaned like they resented every footstep. Cobwebs hung from the rafters like abandoned dreams. Tucked in the far corner under a moth-eaten baby blanket and a broken lamp was a shoebox I didn't recognize. It was taped shut, and on the lid in handwriting I'd never seen before was one word: for her. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe because it felt like opening it would answer a question I didn't know I was asking. Inside were pieces of a story I had never been told. A photograph, faded, curling at the edges, of a man holding a newborn in his arms. His face was partly turned, but I could see the shadow of a beard, the kind eyes, a hospital bracelet around his wrist with my name on it. There were letters, too, dozens of them, all addressed to my mother, none opened. They spoke of longing, regret, please to see me just once, even from afar. Please, Diane, just a picture. I won't come near, I won't interfere, I just want to know she's okay. I saw her from across the street the other day. She looked just like you when you were 16. It nearly broke me. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to care, even if it's from a distance. Each one ended the same way. Tell her I love her, even if she never knows who I am. I sat on the attic floor for what felt like hours, the box in my lap, the truth heavy in my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't run down the stairs to demand answers from my mother. I just sat there, because some truths don't hit you like lightning. They fall like rain, slow at first, gentle, then all at once they soak you through. The next day I went back to the store. I didn't need anything. I just wanted to see him. He was there, of course. Same spot, same posture, same quiet dignity. And for the first time when I looked at him, I didn't see a stranger. I saw the man in the photograph, older, worn, weathered, but him, the man who wrote the letters, the man who stood in the shadows of my life asking for nothing but the chance to care, my father. I didn't speak to him, not yet. But as I walked past, I let my eyes meet his and I smiled. Not the polite kind, a real one. And this time, he smiled back. Chapter 4. The Sharp Edges of Silence. The silence between a mother and daughter can be more deafening than any scream. It was a Thursday night. The air in the kitchen was heavy with the scent of garlic and regret. She was chopping onions, humming a song from the radio, something old and soft from the 80s, and I was sitting at the table staring at her back. I had planned it in my head, the way I'd ask, the calm tone I'd use, the timing. I thought if I asked gently enough, I'd peel back a layer of her silence like a sheet of old wallpaper. But when the moment came, all my preparation fell away. "Mom," I said, and my voice already betrayed me. "Why did you lie to me about Dad?" The knife stopped mid-chop. She didn't turn around, not right away. Just stood there, her hands frozen above the cutting board, her back stiffening like glass about to crack. When she finally turned, her face was unreadable. Not shock, not confusion, just defense. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "I found the box," I said. "In the attic, the one with the letters, the photo, the bracelet." Her mouth tightened just slightly. "That was private." "So was the truth," I said. She walked to the sink, turned on the water, and rinsed her hands. It was a small gesture, mechanical, almost too calm. When she finally looked at me, there was no trace of the woman who used to tuck notes in my lunchbox. Just a mother with a wall built high and deep. "I told you what you needed to know," she said. "No, you told me what you needed to control." The words surprised even me. They came out sharper than I intended, but it was too late to take them back. Her lips parted, then closed again. A second passed, then another. Finally, she pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "You think it was easy," she said, her voice quieter now. "Raising you alone, you think I wanted this life." He left, okay. He left when things got hard, when we couldn't pay the rent, when I got sick, when you were just a baby. "He didn't leave," I said. "He wrote to you, begged to see me. He didn't even know if I was okay." She looked away. I watched her jaw clench, the muscles twitch beneath her skin. For a moment she looked older, not in a tired way, but in a haunted one. People can write all kinds of things when they're not the one waking up at 3 a.m. To hold a baby with a fever, she said. People say sorry in letters so they don't have to say it in person. Or maybe you never gave him the chance, I whispered. She stood up suddenly, the chair scraping against the tile. "This conversation is over." "No," I said, standing too. "It's not. Because every time I looked in the mirror and saw a face I didn't recognize, every time I wondered why Father's Day made me feel hollow, you let me believe he didn't want me, that he was dead, that he disappeared, but he didn't. She looked at me then, not as a mother, not even as an opponent, but as a woman being forced to remember something she had spent years burying. You don't know what I was protecting you from, she said. Then tell me, I said. Stop hiding behind silence and tell me. The room went still. Even the radio had gone quiet. She didn't speak. Not then, not that night. She walked away and I let her go. Later, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something. The truth doesn't always arrive wrapped in a full explanation. Sometimes it comes in a pause, a flinch, the absence of denial. And that night, in all her silence, I heard everything I needed to hear. Chapter 5. The man who stepped in. Some moments sneak up on you and then stay with you forever. It had been a long week at school, at home, inside my own head. My mother barely spoke to me after that night. Her silence wasn't the icy kind, it was the weary kind. The kind you feel more than hear. The kind that says, I'm not ready without needing the words. I didn't press her. Not again. Instead, I took to walking. Long walks after school through side streets past old shops, sometimes ending up at the edge of town where the air smelled like rust and memory. That Friday, the sun was already setting when I left the library. I'd lost track of time, head buried in college prep books I barely understood. The buses had stopped running and my phone was down to 3%. I figured I'd take the shortcut home through the alley behind the strip mall. That's when I noticed the footsteps behind me. Too close, too steady. I quickened my pace. They did too. I turned down a side path, heart hammering now. My backpack bounced against me and my mind raced through headlines, warnings, and every cautionary tale I'd ever rolled my eyes at. Then came the voice. Hey, you dropped something. I didn't. I knew I didn't. I turned just enough to glimpse him, a man in a gray hoodie, face shadowed, walking faster now. I ran. Not a sprint, not yet, but fast enough that my breath started catching. Hey, he called again, louder now. I could hear his steps, harder, closer, and then panic. My shoe caught on a loose stone and I stumbled to the ground, palms scraping the concrete. Leave me alone, I shouted, scrambling up. He didn't, he kept coming, and then a voice, loud and sharp, cut through the dusk. Hey, step away from her. I turned. Out of nowhere from the shadows at the alley entrance, him. The security guard, still in uniform, still carrying nothing but a flashlight and his voice. But something about him made the man in the hoodie stop. They locked eyes. For a moment, no one moved. Then the stranger scoffed, raised his hands like this was all just a joke, and backed away slowly before disappearing into the far end of the alley. I stood there, heart in my throat, blood pounding in my ears. And he, my quiet, invisible guardian, stepped forward slowly, his eyes on me. You okay? He asked, voice calm, breath steady. I nodded, too stunned to speak. He handed me my backpack, which I didn't remember dropping. I've been walking behind you for a few minutes, he said. From the bus stop, something didn't feel right. Why? I asked, barely a whisper. Why were you there? He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something that didn't make sense, not right away. Some habits, they're hard to break. Then he smiled, gentle, sad, and started to turn away. Wait, I said, finding my voice again. What's your name? He paused, turned just enough to meet my eyes, and with a softness that felt like it had been waiting years to be spoken aloud, he said, Daniel. Then he walked back into the fading light, leaving me standing in the echo of his name, a name I had never heard, and yet somehow always known. Chapter 6. Faces that don't fade, names have power. Some slip past you like water through your fingers, but others, they stick, like a splinter under your skin. You can try to ignore them, but every time you move, they hurt just enough to remind you they are there. Daniel. That name echoed in my mind for days after the alley. I said it aloud once in my room just to hear it in my own voice. It didn't feel foreign. It felt like a name I'd heard whispered through closed doors or muffled through the walls in the middle of the night. But I had never spoken it. Not that I could remember. That weekend, while my mom was out running errands, I went back to the attic. Not for the box. I already knew what was inside. I went looking for something older, something deeper, and I found it, tucked in a worn photo album beneath plastic pages yellowed with time was a picture of him. He looked younger, barely out of his 20s, with soft eyes and a crooked smile, holding a tiny version of me in his arms. The back of the photo was labeled in blue ink, barely legible. Cassie and Daniel first week home. I traced the name with my thumb, so it was true. Not just the letters, not just the intuition. Daniel was my father, but there was more. An old birthday card unsigned, but I recognized the handwriting. It matched the letters in the attic. A small stuffed bear with a torn ear and a ribbon around its neck. And then a hospital document. Discharge papers. Mother Diane M. Carson. Father Daniel R. Cole. I sat on the attic floor as a kind of silence settled around me, not empty but full. Full of all the things that had been hidden. Full of the years I'd spent filling in the blanks with anger. My mother had erased him, and in doing so, erased a part of me too. I didn't know what to do with that. Part of me wanted to run to the store and confront him. Another part wanted to scream at my mother until she gave me every answer. But most of me just sat there. Because knowing someone is your father and feeling it are two different things. And yet something had shifted. I remembered things I hadn't thought about in years. A man with a deep laugh lifting me high into the air. The smell of aftershave and peppermint. The sound of someone humming softly while brushing my hair. And now I knew it wasn't my mother. Memory is funny that way. It stores things until you're ready to remember them. And now, suddenly, I was remembering everything. I began watching him again, but this time not with suspicion, with recognition. He worked his shifts quietly, nodded to customers, broke up the occasional argument over expired coupons. But I noticed things other people didn't. How he tensed when a man raised his voice in the parking lot. How his eyes always scanned for exits before his feet moved. How he smiled at children but never got too close. He was a man who had spent years being cautious. Maybe not just because of the job, maybe because love for him had always been something he had to love from behind glass. That Sunday I walked past him with my usual tote bag and a bottle of orange soda. "Evening," he said like always, but this time I stopped. "Hey," I said, "you, working tomorrow?" He raised an eyebrow. "Always." I nodded. "Good." He looked at me for a beat too long, as if trying to solve a riddle that was suddenly solving itself. "Be safe," he said, a little softer than usual. I didn't say you too, I just smiled. And for the first time in my life I meant it. Chapter 7. When the truth no longer needs permission. The morning I decided to speak to her again, the sky was the color of dishwater. It was one of those dull, overcast days where nothing felt quite awake. The coffee was bitter. The mail was late. The hallway light flickered like it couldn't make up its mind. She was in the kitchen again. Peeling apples, not because she needed to, but because it was something her hands knew how to do when her heart didn't. I watched her for a long moment before saying anything. There were 2 mugs on the table, hers and mine. She hadn't stopped making 2. "You knew I'd come back," I said quietly. Her hands paused, knife midair, then continued slowly. A thin ribbon of apple skin curled onto the counter. "I hoped," she replied. I sat down across from her. Neither of us said anything for a full minute, and then I spoke the name. "Daniel." The knife stopped. She didn't look up. "I met him," I said, still no reaction. "In the alley, a man was following me. He showed up. He saved me." Now she looked up. Her eyes met mine, and they weren't angry. They weren't even afraid. They were tired, like someone who had held a secret too long and was finally allowed to set it down. "I always wondered," she said softly, "if someday your lives would cross. Why didn't you tell me?" The words came out smaller than I intended, not accusatory, not demanding, just broken. She sighed, setting down the apple. "I was 23, scared, poor. Your father, he was gentle, but the world wasn't. He couldn't keep a job, couldn't manage money. He loved you, God, he did, but he kept promising and breaking things in the same breath." She paused. "One day I came home and found an eviction notice taped to the door. You were 6 months old. He'd gambled our last rent check trying to double it." I looked down at the table. "He told a different story." "I'm sure he did," she said quietly. "People do when guilt is too heavy to carry plainly." Silence again, but something in me felt off. "That's not all, is it?" I said. "Because you didn't just leave him, you erased him." She closed her eyes, folded her hands in her lap. "I didn't want you to grow up waiting for a man who didn't know how to show up." There it was, the sharp, clean slice of a mother's regret. "And when he started sending letters," I asked. Her voice dropped. "I read them, every one of them, and each time I told myself he was just trying to soothe his own conscience. That if he really wanted to be here, he would have knocked on the door. He never did." "He stood outside it," I said. "Every day he never stopped watching." She looked up again. This time her face cracked open a little. "Did he tell you that?" "No," I said. "But I saw it in his eyes. He watches like someone who lost something precious, and blames no one but himself." Her mouth trembled then, just slightly, and for the first time in years I saw my mother not as the fortress of my childhood, but as a woman, fragile, flawed, and quietly breaking inside. "I didn't know how to let him back in," she whispered, "and by the time I thought I might, it felt too late." The apple sat half-peeled on the counter. The coffee had gone cold, but somehow in the quiet something else had warmed. "I want to see him again," I said. She nodded. I think you should." She reached for my hand then, not to stop me, not to hold on, just to say without words, "Go. I won't stand in your way anymore." And in that moment something heavy lifted from both of us. Not the whole truth, not the pain, but the permission to begin again. Chapter 8. A table between us. The next morning I walked into the grocery store with nothing in my cart but a question. It wasn't a busy day. A Tuesday around 10 a.m. The kind of hour meant for retirees and quiet people who don't like crowds. The automatic doors sighed open like always. And there he was, like always, Daniel. Except now I knew what that name meant. He was standing near the entrance, scanning the aisles, arms folded loosely in front of him. His badge was slightly crooked, his shoelaces uneven, his eyes still soft. I stopped 3 steps inside. He turned. And this time he saw me before I saw him. "Cassie." He said my name like it had weight, like it had always lived in the back of his throat, waiting to be said out loud without guilt. "Can we talk?" I asked. He didn't say anything, just nodded once. A quiet yes. We ended up at the small cafe inside the store, the one that serves oversugared coffee and muffins that taste like cardboard, but it didn't matter. He sat across from me, folding his hands together carefully like he was still learning what to do with them. I didn't touch my drink. Neither did he. For a while we just sat there until I broke the silence. You knew who I was the whole time, didn't you? He nodded. Since you were 10, my heart stopped. 10. He smiled faintly. You had a red backpack. You walked in with your mom. You asked for a chocolate bar and she said no. You sulked the whole time. I never forgot. Why didn't you say anything? His eyes dropped to his hands. I wanted to every time, but I didn't want to disrupt your life, and after everything with your mom, I thought maybe staying close, even quietly, was better than nothing at all. You never tried to fight for custody. I did, he said, once, when you were 3, but I didn't have a job, no place to live. Her lawyers made me look like a ghost with a gambling problem. He paused. They weren't entirely wrong either. I'd made mistakes, bad ones. He took a breath. But I never stopped loving you, not one day. The words didn't come like a Hallmark card. They came like an apology, still learning how to stand on its own. And I believed him, not because of the words, but because of the look on his face when he said them. I used to dream about you, I whispered. I didn't know your name, just a tall man who picked me up and called me kiddo. I thought I'd made him up. He smiled, and for the first time I saw it fully, the resemblance, the shape of my eyes, the angle of my jaw, the smile I never knew came from him. That was my word for you, he said. Always, kiddo, just one word, but it cracked something open inside me that had been closed too long. Why a security job? I asked. Why here? He chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. Started as coincidence. I was working night shifts nearby when I saw your mom one day. Followed her to this place, saw you. After that, I made sure I stayed, got this job, been here ever since. You stayed all these years. I didn't know what else to do with missing you. That was it, the sentence that stayed with me, not the dramatic reveal, not the regret. Just the honest truth of a man who had nothing left to offer but presence. And gave it every single day. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat there, 2 paper cups between us, letting the silence be softer this time. Letting it say things neither of us quite knew how to form yet. But for the first time in my life, the seat across from me wasn't empty. He was here. He had always been here. Chapter 9. The knock that didn't wait. The thing about secrets is, they don't stay secrets forever. Especially when someone feels they are about to lose control. I didn't tell my mother right away that I had met Daniel again. I needed, a few days to let the dust settle in my own chest, to make peace with the truth before inviting more conflict in. But the thing is, secrets leak. Not in shouts, but in sighs, in how your smile changes shape, in how your eyes drift elsewhere when someone speaks. And apparently I wasn't as careful as I thought, because on Saturday afternoon, just after lunch, he knocked on my bedroom door without waiting for an answer. Warren, my stepfather, polished, proud, always with an answer, always with a plan. You've been distant, he said, stepping inside like the room belonged to him. Your mother's worried. Is she? I said, eyes still on my laptop. He crossed his arms. Are you seeing someone? I blinked. Excuse me. You've been going out more, coming home late, hiding things. Don't think I haven't noticed. There was an edge to his voice, not concern, control. Is that any of your business? I asked, finally looking at him. He smirked. When you live under my roof, everything is my business. There it was, the line I had heard 100 times, always delivered with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. But this time something in me didn't flinch. I stood up calmly. I saw someone, yes, someone I should have met years ago. His eyes narrowed. Who? I didn't answer, just watched as realization crawled across his face. Oh, he said slowly. That deadbeat. His words hit like a slap. You don't know him, I said. I know enough. A man who walks away from his family doesn't get a second chance just because he puts on a vest and plays security guard. I stepped closer, voice low but steady. He didn't walk away, he was pushed out and then erased. He laughed cold and dismissive. I suppose he told you that. No, I said. He didn't have to, I saw it. In the letters. In the way he looks at me like I'm someone worth waiting for. Warren's jaw clenched. Let me make something clear, he said. Your mother and I built this life. Paid for your school, your clothes, that car outside. Mine, this house, mine. And I won't have some loser from the past crawling back in and undoing everything I've provided. I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, not as the man who filled the chair at our dinner table, but as someone who had always treated love as a transaction. You never loved me, I said quietly. You loved the image, the control. He didn't deny it. He just straightened his shirt collar like this conversation was beneath him now. Stay away from him, he said, if you know what's good for you. Then he walked out, closing the door with the kind of softness that felt more like a threat than a slam. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was afraid of Warren, but because I realized something far more painful. I had mistaken structure for safety, obedience for love, silence for peace. But real peace doesn't come from being kept quiet. It comes from being allowed to speak. And tomorrow, I was going to speak to Daniel again, not just as a curious daughter, but as someone ready to choose who gets to be in her life, on her terms. Chapter 10. The word I had been waiting for. The storm that night came without warning. One moment the air was still, the next it cracked with thunder that rattled the window frames. I found myself standing outside the grocery store long after closing, the neon sign buzzing faintly against the dark. I hadn't planned to be there. I just walked and my feet decided before my head did. And there he was, of course, locking up the doors, rain slicking his gray hair to his forehead. The tired man in the vest, the man who had stood invisible for so long. The man I now knew had never really been gone. Daniel, I called. He turned, flashlight still in his hand. His face lit up for a moment, then softened into worry. Cassie, what are you doing out here? It's pouring. I stepped closer, rain soaking my jacket, my shoes, my skin. I didn't care. I need to know, I said, my voice cracked on the words. Not guesses, not letters, not memories from you. His eyes shifted, heavy with something I could not name, fear maybe, or longing. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His hand trembled slightly as he tucked the flashlight under his arm. I don't want to hurt you, he said softly. Then don't lie, I whispered. For a long moment, all we heard was the rain slapping against the pavement, and then he nodded. You're right, he said. His voice was lower now, rougher. I've watched from a distance for too long. You deserve the truth. I held my breath. I am your father. The words were simple. They didn't come with a dramatic flourish. No music swelled. No lights flickered. Just 3 words, heavy, unshakable, final. My knees felt weak. I grabbed the edge of the metal cart rack just to steady myself. Why now? I managed to say. Because you asked, he replied. His eyes glistened, though the rain masked most of it. Because for 17 years I've whispered those words into the night, into the empty air, hoping somehow they'd reach you. And tonight, finally, you asked me to say them out loud. I swallowed hard. I hated you, I confessed. All my life I hated the idea of you. I know, he said, and I don't blame you. I would have hated me too. Lightning split the sky. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, drenched, carrying the weight of years between us. I don't know if I can forgive you, I whispered. He nodded once. You don't have to. Just let me prove in whatever time I have left that I never stopped being your father, even when I wasn't allowed to be. And for the first time, I saw him not as the weary man by the sliding doors, but as the man who had carried me in his arms once. The man whose blood ran in mine. The man who had waited quietly all these years. I didn't hug him. I didn't run away. I just stood there crying in the rain, and he stood with me, no longer invisible, no longer a secret, just my father. Chapter 11, The Past Unfolded. We found shelter in a 24-hour diner off Main Street. The kind with red vinyl booths and a jukebox no one used anymore. The rain still lashed against the windows, but inside the world smelled of coffee and bacon grease. Daniel sat across from me, his uniform damp, his hair dripping onto the Formica table. He didn't seem to notice. His hands were wrapped around a mug of black coffee, though he hadn't taken a sip. "Your mother isn't wrong about everything," he began, voice low. "I wasn't ready. Not when you were born. I thought love would be enough to keep a roof over our heads. Turns out it wasn't." He stared into the mug, as if the dark liquid held the pieces of a life he'd broken. "I tried, Cassie. God, I tried. Worked construction during the day, stocked shelves at night, but bills don't wait for dreams to catch up, and one bad decision led to another. A friend convinced me I could double our rent money at a poker game. Instead, I lost it all." His jaw tightened. "I came home to eviction papers. Your mom holding you, crying in the corner. I swore it was just one mistake, but one mistake is all it takes for people to stop believing in you. I didn't move, didn't speak." He went on. "She gave me an ultimatum, clean up, get steady, or get out. I tried. I swear I did, but every job slipped through my hands, and the more I failed, the more I drowned. Not in drink, not in drugs, just in shame. That's worse sometimes. Shame eats you alive quietly." He rubbed his eyes. "When she left, she told me I'd never see you again, said it was better that way, that I'd only drag you down, and in a way she was right. At least then she was." A silence hung heavy between us. "But I never stopped writing," he said, finally looking at me. His eyes weren't begging, they were confessing. "Letters every week, every month. I left them at her door, mailed them, begged her family to give them to her. I asked just to see you from across the street, nothing more. I thought of the shoebox in the attic, the unopened envelopes." "She kept them," I said quietly. "She just never showed me." His mouth twitched, a bitter smile. "I figured. But that was enough. Knowing she didn't throw them away meant maybe one day you'd find them." He leaned back, exhaling, so I stayed close. Took the only steady job I could get, security. Nothing glamorous, but it let me be near you, watch you grow. I saw your first school uniform, your first date, the boy who didn't open the car door. I wanted to march over and scare him straight, but I didn't, because I wasn't supposed to be there at all. His voice cracked then, for the first time. "You don't know what it's like, Cassie, to love your child from 20 feet away, to clap silently at every milestone, to memorize a life you're not allowed to touch." I swallowed hard, throat burning. He set the mug down with a soft clink. "I'm not proud of my mistakes. I don't excuse them, but I need you to know this. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I didn't know how to stay." I sat back, tears stinging my eyes. All those years of silence, of anger, of believing he'd chosen absence. And here he was showing me that sometimes absence isn't a choice at all. Sometimes it's just the only way someone broken knows how to keep loving. Chapter 12. The night everything broke. The fight began with something small. It always does. A comment at dinner. Warren criticizing the way I spoke, the way I carried myself. "You think you're smarter than everyone," he snapped, stabbing his fork into his steak. Mom tried to soften it, but his temper didn't soften with her. It escalated. My refusal to sit quietly, his voice rising, booming against the walls of our too-perfect dining room. Then he stood, And for the first time, the anger in his eyes wasn't just about winning an argument. It was about control, the kind that leaves bruises. He grabbed my arm, hard. "Don't walk away from me," he growled. I tried to twist free. My chair toppled behind me. Mom cried out, "Warren, stop." But her voice was paper against stone. And then, a sound I'll never forget, the sharp command of another voice. "Let her go." We all froze. There in the doorway, drenched from the rain, stood Daniel. Not in his uniform now, just a worn jacket, his face pale but his eyes burning. Warren sneered. "And what the hell do you think you're doing here?" Daniel stepped forward, slow but steady. "I'm here for my daughter." The word daughter landed like thunder. The room split open with it. Warren laughed, a cruel, cutting sound. "Your daughter? You mean the kid you abandoned, the one I raised?" "You didn't raise her," Daniel said firmly. "You controlled her. There's a difference." Warren's face flushed red. He shoved me aside, advancing toward Daniel. "You don't belong here. You never did." And in that moment, the past 17 years, the guilt, the letters, the long nights spent watching from a distance collapsed into one choice. Daniel didn't back away. He stepped closer. "Maybe not," he said. "But tonight, I do." Warren swung first, a fist wild and sharp, fueled by years of arrogance. Daniel didn't dodge. He took the blow, stumbled, then straightened again. "Run, Cassie," he said, his voice hoarse but commanding. "Get your mother out." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Another hit. Daniel fell against the wall, his head striking the frame. For a terrifying second, I thought he wouldn't get up. But he did. Blood at his lip, eyes blazing. He grabbed Warren by the collar, pulling him in close. "You will never lay a hand on her again." They struggled, a storm of fists and fury crashing into furniture, knocking over glasses. Mom screamed. I tried to pull them apart, but they were fire and gasoline too far gone. And then, a moment that burned itself into me forever. Warren swung with all his weight. Daniel pushed me back, shielding me. The blow landed on him instead, square in the ribs. He gasped, staggered but stayed upright. Because love will make a man stand when his body begs him to fall. The room finally cracked open with sirens. A neighbor had called. Red and blue lights flashed against the windows. Officers stormed in, pulling Warren away, shouting orders neither of us could hear over the sound of our own pounding hearts. Daniel collapsed into a chair, clutching his side. I dropped beside him, tears blinding my vision. "You didn't have to do that," I sobbed. He smiled faintly, pain etched deep in his face. "Yes, I did. I always did. I just finally got the chance." And for the first time I held onto him, not as a stranger, not as a ghost, but as my father. Chapter 13, The Mask Falls. The flashing lights painted the street in streaks of red and blue. Neighbors stood in their doorways, arms folded, whispers cutting through the humid night air. Inside, the house was chaos, chairs overturned, glass shattered. A picture frame cracked on the floor, the one of us at the beach, smiling for a camera that had lied. Warren was pinned against the wall by two officers, still thrashing, still shouting. "This is a mistake. She's exaggerating. Ask her, ask Diane." But Mom didn't speak. She stood frozen in the corner, arms wrapped tight around herself, as if holding her ribs could stop her heart from breaking. "Sir," one officer barked, "you need to calm down." "I am calm," Warren roared, his face twisted with rage. "I've provided for this family. Everything in this damn house is because of me." Daniel sat hunched in a chair, one hand pressed against his side, blood staining his shirt. His breathing was shallow but steady. Even then his eyes weren't on himself, they were on me. And that was what broke me. How could two men in the same room, both claiming a place in my life, feel so completely different? One saw me as an extension of his control. The other, wounded, worn down, saw me as a person worth protecting. The officers began leading Warren out, but he wasn't finished. "You think you've won," he spat at Daniel. "You think playing hero changes the fact that you're a failure. She'll see it soon enough, just like Diane did." Mom flinched. His words hit her like a whip. For the first time in years, she looked at him not as a husband, not even as an adversary, but as a stranger she no longer recognized. "Stop," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Warren twisted his head toward her, sneering. "After everything I've given you, this is how you—" "No," she cut him off. Her hands were shaking, but her voice sharpened. "You didn't give, you bought, and I let you. I thought I was protecting my daughter by keeping stability, by keeping appearances, but all I did was trade love for security, and now I see it." Her eyes welled up. "I see everything." Warren scoffed, but the officers dragged him outside before he could throw another word like a knife. The door slammed shut, and just like that, the house was quieter than it had ever been. Mom turned to me then. Her face was pale, lined with regret. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "For all of it, for him, for the lies, for keeping your father from you." Her voice cracked. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was saving you from disappointment. But the truth is, I was saving myself from facing my own." Tears blurred my vision. Daniel stirred in his chair, wincing in pain but managing to speak. "She was just scared," he said softly. "We both were." Mom covered her face with her hands, and for the first time I didn't feel anger toward her, just a hollow sadness, because fear had stolen more from us than any man ever could. That night, as Warren sat in the back of a squad car, shouting into the void, the three of us remained inside, me, my mother, my father. And for the first time in my life, I realized something simple, something brutal. A family can be built on lies as easily as it can be built on love, but only one of those survives when the mask falls. Chapter 14, Between Anger and Grace. The house was quiet after Warren was gone, too quiet. It wasn't the kind of silence that comforts you. It was the kind that presses on your chest, heavy, asking questions you don't want to answer. Daniel sat on the couch, a towel pressed to his ribs, his breath uneven but steady enough. Mom hovered in the kitchen, wringing her hands, pacing like a ghost unsure of where to belong, and me. I stood in the hallway, unable to step fully into either room. I didn't know which hurt more, the 17 years of absence or the realization that absence had never meant indifference. I thought of birthdays without a father, school plays where I scanned the crowd, seeing only empty seats. Father-daughter dances I skipped altogether. I thought of every moment I had convinced myself he had chosen not to be there. And now here he was, bruised, bloodied, but here, always here. The weight of that contradiction crushed me. "Cassie." His voice was gentle, drawing me back. Daniel motioned for me to sit beside him. I did, cautiously, leaving space between us. My hands clenched in my lap. "I don't know what to do with this," I admitted, my voice breaking. "All those years I hated you. I cursed your name even though I didn't know it. I told myself you were nothing, and now," tears blurred my eyes, "now I see you and all I feel is—" Confused, he finished softly. I nodded. He leaned back, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "You don't owe me forgiveness, Cassie, not tonight, maybe not ever. I lost that right a long time ago, but if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my days proving I can be the father you deserved from the start." His words weren't polished, they weren't rehearsed, they were raw, and because of that they reached me. I turned to him, searching his face, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the exhaustion carved into his skin, the quiet strength that had kept him standing when everything else told him to fall. "You hurt me," I whispered. "I know. You weren't there, I know, But you wanted to be. He looked at me then, not blinking, not wavering. Every single day, for a long time, we just sat there, anger and grace both alive inside me, wrestling like shadows under the same light. Finally, I leaned just slightly closer, enough that our shoulders brushed. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall I had built. And sometimes that's where love begins again, not with grand gestures, but with the smallest space shared in silence. Chapter 15. A family of fractures. The next evening the storm had passed. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, and the house, though still bruised from the night before, was strangely calm. We sat around the kitchen table, not in the usual arrangement, not with routine, just three people bound by blood and mistakes, searching for words big enough to hold 17 years. Daniel looked worn, his side still bandaged, his eyes shadowed. But there was a softness in him, a humility that made the air feel lighter. Mom sat across from him, shoulders rounded, hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. She kept glancing at me, then at him, then away, as if she didn't deserve to look too long. I was between them, for the first time, the bridge instead of the battlefield. "I don't even know where to start," Mom whispered. "Try the truth," I said gently. She nodded, swallowing hard. "I was young, scared. You were all I had, Cassie. And when Daniel stumbled, I panicked. I thought choosing stability was the same as choosing love. I see now it wasn't." Her eyes brimmed. "I punished him for being imperfect, but the truth is I was imperfect too, I just hid it better." Daniel's gaze softened. "You did what you thought was best," he said. "No," she replied, her voice cracking. "I did what was easiest for me." The silence after that felt sacred, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I turned to Daniel. "What would you have done differently?" He didn't hesitate. "Everything," he said, then quieter. "But mostly I would have stayed, even when I had nothing, especially when I had nothing." His words pierced me, because isn't that what love is supposed to be? Not the shiny parts, not the victories, but the staying even in the ruin. I blinked away tears. "Do you still want to?" I asked. My voice was small, but the question wasn't. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw a father's gaze, steady, unshakable, full of quiet pride. "More than anything," he said. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. His fingers trembled before closing around mine, warm and certain. Mom covered her mouth, sobbing softly, not from anger, not from fear, but from the sight of what she had kept from me, finally alive before her eyes. Daniel squeezed my hand. "Kiddo," he whispered, the word trembling like it had waited 17 years to be spoken again. And just like that, I broke. I leaned into him and he pulled me close, awkward at first, then sure, holding me with the kind of strength only love can give. Mom reached across the table, laying her hand gently on my back, and for the first time in my life, the three of us, fractured, scarred, but still here, sat together as a family. Not whole, not healed, but together. Chapter 16, What Remains. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it softens the edges, makes them livable. Weeks passed. Warren's name faded from our house like smoke after a fire, an echo, nothing more. The silence he left behind was heavy at first, but in time it became something else. A chance to breathe. Daniel stayed close, not as a shadow anymore, but as a father. He still worked his shifts at the grocery store, still stood by those sliding doors, vest a little crooked, eyes always scanning. But now when I walked in, I didn't avert my gaze. I walked toward him. We had coffee on Sundays, sometimes at that awful diner, sometimes just on the park bench outside. He told me stories of his youth, of mistakes and lessons, of the dreams he once had and the ones he still held quietly in his chest. And I told him mine. Not polished, not perfect. Just mine. Mom joined us more often than not. The three of us, awkward at first, then comfortable, then grateful. She apologized 1,000 different ways, not just in words, but in listening, in showing up, in letting herself be vulnerable. Forgiveness didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, in laughter that felt freer, in arguments that didn't end in slammed doors, in the way I began to look at both of them, not as heroes or villains, but as people, flawed, fragile, trying. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the world in amber light, I asked Daniel why he still kept the security job. "You could do something else," I said. "Anything else." He smiled, lines deepening around his eyes. "I could, but I don't want to." "Why not?" He looked at me then with that steady father's gaze. "Because this way, I get to see you every day. And after losing 17 years, that's all the wealth I'll ever need." My chest ached at the simplicity of it, at the truth of it. He didn't need to be more. He just needed to be here. And for the first time, that was enough. Family, I've learned, isn't about perfection. It isn't about the roles people are supposed to play. It's about the ones who stay, the ones who show up, even if it takes them years to learn how. My father was once the man I mocked for being ordinary. Now, he's the man I thank for teaching me that ordinary love shown quietly day after day is the most extraordinary thing of all. At Twist of Revenge, we share tales not only of conflict and betrayal, but of love, reconciliation, and the quiet strength of family. We hope this story touched your heart. If it did, please consider subscribing so you can walk with us through more journeys like this. Until next time, may you and your family be blessed with health, peace, and happiness.